Hello, everyone. My name is Stuart Mitchell. I'm pleased to be. You saw me, so I guess I'm going to cut my video off. Anyway, just to introduce myself, I'll tell you a little bit more about myself as things come along. But as I go through the material, um, I've been a wildfire risk consultant since 2019. Previous to that, I was a FEMA crisis counselor for survivors of the fires in 2017 during the 2017 Tubbs fire. And I have a background in environmental health management. I have a background in mental health. And so I also have a background in emergency preparedness, community emergency response team, which is a community-based response team, volunteer response team. And so after being a FEMA crisis counselor, I decided that I could help first responders and residents to prepare for wildfire by giving them good advice. So that's how I got into this field. I absolutely love it. And I don't sell products or services directly. I am there for the homeowner, business owner, ranch owner, HOA board, commercial property, etc. And I'm there to educate people on how to prepare for wildfire and all of its various elements, including structure hardening, defensible space, materials, looking out for first responders, insurance issues, etc. So, how I would introduce myself briefly. The other part of my risk consulting work is I provide a summary report with about 110 criteria. And initially, what I do, this is my process, is I find that educating people on understanding the basics, what their strengths and vulnerabilities on their property are, and other important information that I'm going to go over today is extremely important for them. So we sit down and I educate them very briefly about a number of important things. Then we walk around the property together and I'm pointing out strengths and vulnerabilities, photographing, and then I'm available to answer questions and problem solve around the priorities on their property. So that's a little bit about one thing I'd love for to happen today, honestly, is to get a lot of dialogue questions. I'm going to go over a bunch of important stuff, fairly quickly. You all are very experienced, highly educated people on many different levels. And what I'm hoping to do is share my field-based experience and perspective with you. Um, you know, there are people in the group that know materials and triple pane windows and ceiling, building envelopes, etc., better than me, and that's fine. Passive House to me integrates so many valuable aspects around climate resilience, wildfire resilience, minimizing the infiltration of what I call urban conflagration smoke. And so I'm really hoping to just give you a lot of important perspective and then, but not get into a lot of technical detail about materials and things like that. Because what I find is that people are not understanding what's most important, right? So I think some of us in the room have kids. Years ago, I had someone say, it's really important with kids to focus on what's most important, not this little detail, but what's most important. So when it comes to wildfire, even with fire chiefs, other prevention experts, they're leaving out some really important things. So I'm excited to share some of that with you today. You can go to the next slide. So this is just a quick and dirty breakdown of the five learning objectives. I broke them down into four because they're sort of redundant. But we're going to talk about all these things throughout our time here. And Cyril's gonna keep me on track in terms of time and other logistical things. So I trust that you guys are gonna keep up, right? Please take notes and put questions in the chat. And I really want to leave time for questions, dialogue, whatever. And so I really want to encourage that. This is a really important concept: control what you can. So what I've observed countless times is that we as humans point to our neighbor. We point to the forest, the fire agencies, insurance companies, utilities. Those are all really important factors. Climate change is an important factor, and it's not to be disregarded. What I'm emphasizing here is we need to control what we can, which is our learning, and working on the property, roof down, structure out. So even though you have a park nearby or a neighbor nearby or other issues nearby, those are relevant, but we always want to work from that wildfire mitigation perspective, structure outward, not neighbor inward, not forest inward. Again, I'm not saying the forest and the neighbor is not relevant, but we can control ourselves and our parcels. So as we know, some people live in apartments, some people live in suburbs, some people live in the mountains, some people have 5 acres, some people have no space around them, and I'm fully aware of all those different environments. By the way, I think most of the people on this call are from the SoCal area. I grew up a few miles from the Eaton Fire, so I'm very familiar with that region. I currently live in Sonoma County, which is about an hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I've looked at thousands of structures in Napa, Marin, and Sonoma counties of all different shapes and sizes. So again, going back to this principle, we need to educate ourselves. So one of the main things that's the topmost priority above everything else is that wildfire gives us time. Time is our friend. With an earthquake, if you have the MyShake Alert app, which is free through the state of California or UC Berkeley, it will give you up to 15 to 20 seconds notification on earthquake. 15 or 20 seconds sounds silly, however, maybe not, right? It can really be beneficial. With a wildfire, however, you may have 3, 4, 5, 6 days. So when the Lahaina fire started a few years ago, I immediately started looking in the news reports. I didn't see anybody talking about predicted fire weather at all for maybe 6, 8 months. There's an amazing, if you guys really want to dig deep into it, we can email each other offline, but there's an amazing research institute called the Fire Science Research Institute, and they did probably 3 extensive reports on the Lahaina fire. Each of those reports were after action studies, and they were probably 200 pages each. And thankfully, they're one of the few organizations that looks at predicted fire weather. So Lahaina had not 4 hours, but 4 days notification for the National Weather Service. So with that time, there are many important things that should be done. And I'm not here to point fingers to anyone for doing the wrong thing in any fire. However, I'm just providing a resource for people. If you have 4 or 5 days, 5 days for the LA fires, you can either do nothing, or you can do the right site-specific things for your property and your family. So predicted fire weather is essential. We can go to that next slide. Thank you. Along with that is signing up for your official local alerts. And that's going to be hopefully where the authorities are going to be telling you what's happening with the fire and to evacuate and whatnot. Along with the local official alerts, I really recommend strongly, most of you probably are now, signed up for Watch Duty. So you want to go to the next slide if you could. Watch Duty is a free wildfire alert app, and usually in a live presentation, I'll ask people to raise their hand who's signed up for Watch Duty. It gives you status reports on the location of the fire, what's happening with the fire. Is it out? Are they sending aircraft? Are they talking about warning? Are you in what warning zone are you in? And what's great about it, so many things, but it's geolocated to your phone, not to your zip code, right? So if I'm visiting, Susie, and I'm not in my part of town, the phone's with me, it geolocates it. And as you may know, it used to cover 22 states, now it's in 50 states. And it's a game changer when you want to zoom out and look at, your aunt's house in Oregon, what's happening over there. Watch Duty also provides, it's a free app. Again, I did sign up for the professional level, but I believe even the free apps will demonstrate predicted fire weather. So there's a layer that people can see and say, wow, there's predicted fire weather in Southern Oregon. I need to call my aunt. So absolute game changer. So what we're looking at here, I have a bunch of QR codes for you guys, by the way, so get ready for that. I'm going to provide you with a tremendous amount of information that you can check out later. So this slide is discussing the Ready, Set, Go. And again, why are we talking about this? This isn't passive house, but it is, right? So we're looking at preventing impacts to human health, first responders, and to our buildings. insurance will absolutely come into play as well. But life safety always has to come first. In Lahaina, if the authorities had decided hypothetically to evacuate the town, they would have saved 101 lives. In Sonoma County in 2019, the authorities here, based on predicted fire weather, we evacuated 200,000 people. That never would have happened if we didn't suffer the firestorm in 2017. People say, what are you talking about? No way are we doing that. Well, we learned our lesson. So again, super important. So the ready, set, go is a standard that's used throughout the country. Definitely CAL FIRE uses it. The ready is months in advance. You're learning, you're preparing your property. Parcel hardening is what I'm going with now. There's structure hardening, defensible space. If you extend that to both and to the entire parcel, you're doing parcel hardening. It's not just one and the other, it's a full integration. So you're doing your parcel hardening, you're getting together with your neighbors, map your neighborhood groups, community emergency response team groups, etc. Then the set is the evacuation warning phase. This could be hours or days, and you're getting your plans together, you're telling people where you're traveling, you're looking at your different evacuation routes, you're buttoning up your home, right? So this goes right to the what I call urban conflagration smoke issue. In alignment with mental health and traumatic stress, if you had the video on me right now, if my internet was better, you could say, oh, I don't see anything on Stuart. He seems fine. Well, I may have a traumatic injury to my psychology. In other words, I may have traumatic stress. That's invisible. I may have been exposed to toxic gases by staying behind and putting out my house with a garden hose. That's an invisible injury. Likewise, a home that is surviving has invisible injuries, and it's been seriously impacted by toxic emissions from all different kinds of things. So with that in mind, I'll give you an example to keep in mind, and you can tell your friends and colleagues this. If it's 1920 and you have a building that's housing one product and only one product, and the product is clothing, everything in that building would be basically either cotton or wool. If you had that same building in today's world and you only stored one product, clothing, the outputs from that one product would be dramatically different. Now, add in all the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of different products in a typical home or a Kmart. So the urban conflagration smoke issue is extremely important. Again, later I'm going to show you a bunch of QR codes that are going to have scientific journals on environmental health, water quality, etc., all related to what I'm discussing. And of course, this integrates into the insurance issue. But I wanted to give you that one example of a building in 1920 with just one product. Okay, so getting on to the go, the set, again, you're prepping your property, you're storing and stowing away all combustible items, you're making sure all your windows and doors are closed. You may have time, if you have 5 days of predicted fire weather, to actually go around and seal up your building envelope. So and this has been done. It's not perfect, but we're looking for risk reduction. We're not looking to eliminate risk. We're trying to improve the scenario. So in addition to, stowing away umbrellas and propane tanks, etc., people often have building vents in their attics, in their soffits, on their roofs, but also foundation vents. And so it is a possibility for people, and as you guys know, the mass majority of homes out there are not new. They are existing homes. So what can people do, right? So we're trying to close over, tape over, seal over, various different methods of that, but you get the idea. And, your HVAC system, obviously you're turning that off. You might have a fire-resistant tarp over your HVAC system. You might set up a positive pressure system with a backup power, a backup battery to power that fan to increase that positive pressure, which again, you guys know a lot about. You can set up a clean room. If you haven't evacuated and you're there and you want to have a clean room through your HEPA filter, your MER 13 filters, etc. And so one of the QR codes that I have provided for you is from the Passive House Accelerator. There was a talk given in 2020, which I really like, And it's basically guys and gals like us trying to figure out how do we keep this smoke from infiltrating into the home, or how do we set up the home after we evacuate to reduce impact. So I have a QR code for that webinar. It's about an hour and 10 minutes. Really good stuff. And again, when we have months in advance, we're doing stuff. When we have 5 days in advance, there are things that we can do to reduce impacts to the home. And then finally, the go order. It's an order to evacuate. Once you leave, you're not allowed back in if there's law enforcement involved. But don't hesitate. Go early and don't get stuck in traffic. Move items and vehicles and boats and lawnmowers, etc., out of the way to prepare your home for the possibility that first responders might come. So when I'm looking at first responders, by the way, I'm looking at dispatchers, EMS, emergency medical service, law enforcement, and fire. That's usually the order of impact in terms of frequency. I'm also looking out for utility workers, which is incredibly important. People don't think about them. But without power, as hence this morning, and this is why I'm in this other place, there's not a lot we can do, and that includes law enforcement. All these other entities have a lot of trouble when there's no power. So again, we're preparing the property. If we have a private gate, we're leaving it open. If we don't want to leave it open, how is a first responder going to access that gate? You think, oh, they have the key, they have the code. Not necessarily. And there's a lot of detail around that. So create an opportunity for that first responder to hop over the fence, pull the release pin of the armature of the gate, and allow them to come in. These are the details that I go into when I do an assessment: water infrastructure, private bridges, gates, access, etc., etc. So next slide. By the way, Cyril, are you driving this? So this is a basic slide that talks about an acronym that I like to use, and it's called RED, R-E-D, radiant heat, wind-blown embers, and then direct flame contact. So as you can imagine, radiant heat, it could be a vehicle that's on fire, it could be a shed, any object that's putting radiant heat onto the structure or another asset. Embers fly over defensible space. They pack in under decking along the bottom edge of siding. They infiltrate into the building, and they ignite the building from the inside out. So you guys have learned, unfortunately, the folks in LA, a lot about this. Direct flame is inherent in the title, but it's just a quick and easy way to remember radiant heat, embers, and direct flame. Studies show from the IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety, that up to 80 to 90% of homes that are damaged and or destroyed in wildfires are caused by embers. So defensible space, vegetation management, critical. Structure hardening is essential, is how I put it. By the way, there are several different types of fire. There's wildland fire. That's fire that's way out in the forest. There's WUI fire, Wildland Urban Interface, where there's an intermix of, urban features and wildland features. And then you have your urban conflagration smoke. So the mass majority of the activity in the Eaton and Palisades fire, and I know there were 3 others, were urban fires. So people are conditioned to point at the forest and say that needs to be fixed way out there. And I'm going to point out a documentary that I recommend discussing this concept. And it includes it's called Elemental, Reimagine Wildfire. And I have a QR code for that. Again, I'm not selling anything. I'm just giving you resources. It's an excellent documentary encompassing several subjects, including the overmanagement of forests. It is important to manage forests. It's just where you do it and how you do it. There's a huge driver around money going to distant places, and I believe that it should go to people and communities, especially low-income and middle-income people, and not to logging distant areas. Again, I'm not saying it's all bad. It's just how it's done and where it's done and how it's prioritized. So the film includes that. It includes indigenous prescribed burning. It includes the IBHS studies on structure ignition. It includes the research by Jack Cohen, PhD, who's one of the godfathers of the 0 to 100 foot zone, and structure hardening. Excellent documentary, can't recommend it enough. Next slide. So here's that film. Here's an image I took during the 2024 Park Fire, and it shows an outbuilding that had excellent defensible space all around it. Why did it burn down? We're not sure. Probably embers landed at the base of the siding or entered into the building, but trust me, from the picture you can't tell, but it had a lot of excellent defensible space. Might pop on that video, yeah. So pause that for a second. Great job, Cyril, appreciate it. This is just a short video, 30 seconds, that I took at a fire fair in Marin County, and it demonstrates IBHS. Sometimes they'll do this at a fire fair. One structure was hardened out of cementatious wood, siding. It had good defensible space, etc. The other shed was had wood chips and bushes and plastic gutters. Believe it or not, they do exist. And I would love it if anybody could quickly answer this pop quiz. What do you think that is down on the lower bottom left corner that looks like an ice cube? Anybody? Someone said garbage can, plastic. Okay, I'm going to give the answer. Ready? It is a window. It's not a triple pane pH, passive house window, right? It is a double pane standard vinyl frame window. So you can play the video and I guess maybe enlarge it or whatever, full screen. I don't hear any sound, which is fine. It's playing slow. It's probably on my end. You can see this white thing flapping around. That's actually a downspout. A wooden fence, wood chips, bushes. They ignited it with firefighters around, and they put some slow wind on the fire to perpetuate it, to make it happen a little quicker. And you can just clearly see one structure surviving, the other one's not. And so it's a really nice visual representation of structure hardening combined with defensible space. So we can move on from that. Next slide. The elemental film again goes over this. Really like it. The same director and producer made a film on the with PBS on the LA fires. Highly recommend that as well. Just briefly, here's some pictures I took during the 2020 glass fire in Napa County. The image on the left, this is what I typically see. Unstowed away garbage cans. Lower edge of siding has wood chips on the bottom edge, and then a gutter full of fuel. So you also have moss, growing on the tiles. But the most combustible thing on that entire home is what firefighters call a receptive fuel bed, and that is a receptive fuel bed. So if you had your Vulcan vents and you had your other hardening, you had your cementatious siding, etc., and you got this open thing, and it's just going to light up that building. So this is not like what I like to say is what we're talking about here is not rocket science, but human behavior is rocket science. And we have to learn and adapt to climate change. I believe we should work on mitigating climate change over the long term. And we can adapt our properties towards resilience in a very short period of time with the right resources, like a week. You can adapt your home in a week if you have the right resources and the right knowledge and the right prioritization, which is very important. The middle picture, that was during a wildfire. And I came to it as part of with permission, I came with a retired firefighter and we did structure protection. We weren't cutting down bushes and stuff, but boy, did we want to. So the middle picture is a massive rosemary bush. It's about 12, 15 feet long, 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. Down below it, wood chips right up against the windows, right underneath the eave. It's the worst cocktail pretty much that you can imagine. So simply replacing that vegetation with fire-wise landscaping, low-growing, high-moisture, broadleaf vegetation, switching out the combustible wood chips, and separating the plants from each other, creating a break or islands to break up continuity vertically and also horizontally is important. That would be a game changer. As it is, if I came to the home and the person was there, I'd say, this is alarming and you need to remove these bushes. However, often I don't necessarily say to remove bushes or trees, where it's all very site specific. And of course, the picture on the right is obvious. It's redwood siding with, by the way, thousands of never before seen cracks in the siding, which can capture embers. You might ask, how did we mitigate that home? What did I recommend? Well, they wanted to keep the siding, so I said the only option is a flame retardant coating. So there is science around flame retardant coatings, and I'll get into that again in a few minutes. Next slide, please. Here are a couple of images. The image on the left is at an HOA in Napa where they asked me to come and protect them from the creek. And I said, okay, sure, I need to look at everything in context. I get there and every single one of their buildings has terrible 0 to 5. So the image on the left, you can see a huge Italian cypress type tree, wood chips below, climbing vines below, wooden connected fence, a bush behind the wooden connected fence, all underneath the eave. Really bad combination. The image on the right demonstrates hardscaping, which is really effective. It's got very, very, very tiny little grass, not concerned about it, and pavers. Really nice. It looks nice. It's safe. However, what do I normally see? I normally see massive amounts of wood chips, and I see a weep screed behind that stucco that is not hardened, that is not coated with any kind of coating. It doesn't have the weep screed, and you got wood chips up underneath it. And I've seen that on brand new, rebuilt, WUI coated homes after a wildfire in Sonoma County. That was signed off by the fire marshal, the permit department, etc. And these are the things that I see. So, that image on the right is great. I love it. There's also a vent there. So there's a rectangular vent, and you put fire in a vent. Thank you for that. That's a really bad combo. So briefly combining the flame retardant coating, Vulcan vents. Maybe many of you have heard of them. It's a mesh vent, and in between the mesh vent, which is on the state of California products list, tested by third-party laboratories, inside that mesh is a honeycomb structure that's coated in intumescent paint. So once the embers will be blocked because of the metal mesh, but if and when there's heat exposed to that honeycomb structure, it will intumesce, it'll expand, and it'll shut itself down. So it goes from passive to active. I tend to go with passive. Again, I like passive housing. I love passive house design for many reasons. But the Vulcan vent goes from passive to active once it's hit by heat. The one company that I do, again, I don't sell it, but I said, do your research. I like them. That's pretty much all I say. Same with contractors. I vetted this contractor. I like them. It's up to you. The intumescent paint, they're called fire-free coatings. The reason I like them is because they were involved in the patent of the Vulcan vent. So their paint is painted on the inside of that honeycomb structure in a very precise way. The paint itself is third-party tested, and it can be used not as a magic bullet, but as a technology to reduce combustion and flame. So here we go. Yeah, a few technologies. Water is great when you have the right timing and duration. So if you have a tiny little campfire outside, and you want to put it out with a garden hose, it works. You're there, you have the right timing and duration. I just caution people with staying behind, putting out fires, of course, because they're impacted with environmental pollutants, etc. There's a lot of harm that can come from that. It has worked. It can be safe, but it's often very dangerous, and generally I don't recommend it. But people set up sprinkler systems, And again, if you have a pool, you have your own water source, and you want to draft water out of it with a pool pump connected to fire hoses, connected to water cannons, and you're firing water around your property into your water, go for it. If you're taking out water out of the water grid, that could be an issue, and I can give examples of that separate from LA. LA also, they had water pressure issues. That's a big story. A lot of variables there. But one of the things to keep in mind is that when there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes burning, they're all leaking water. You're losing your pressure. But back to the technology on the home front, they can work, but be cautious about them. A lot of things have to work correctly for the water to take effect. Plants cannot absorb moisture in their tissues for many days and weeks, and you have low humidity and high winds, and usually the wind is just being blown away and not effective. Class A flame retardant coatings, I just mentioned that. It's a great extra tool. It's not a magic bullet, but it can be very, very effective, and I've seen it demonstrated countless times in front of me. Again, third-party tested. A man who works for Fire Free Coatings, he coated a piece of cardboard, and he put a torch, 3,000 degree torch, and it's not burning the cardboard. So again, not magic, but a great extra tool. The last one is, and again, I talk about these during my consultations because I don't want people to think, oh, if I just do this one thing, I'm good. No, it's an integrated approach. Do what you can, pick the highest priorities. But a long-term ecologically safe retardant is an interesting option. So if you have a winery and the people don't want to do the right thing, plan A, physically modify the vegetation. Disconnect vertically, horizontally, reduce density, cut out dead and dying, etc. That's plan A. Plan B could be to spray an ecologically safe retardant on the vegetation. Komodo is one type to research. Again, not a magic bullet, but it can be a very effective way of slowing down combustion. Unlike the other retardants that have fertilizer, this one is plant-based, and it doesn't promote vegetative growth or damage vegetation due to a high pH and fertilizer. Next slide. Here we go with my QR code barrage, right? So this is an image that I took during the 2024 park fire outside of Chico, 400,000 acres, mostly in wildlands, but here's a home that burned. And there's a few QR codes here. The Chemistry of Urban Wildfires is an amazing compendium put together by the Academy of Sciences, and it's looking at environmental health impacts of urban conflagration smoke, also water impacts, soil impacts, etc. Likewise, the other publication there, and if you put your phone up to the screen, it will open up those links, I'm hoping, and you can look at them later. And then the third one is the Passive House on the Front Line. That's that webinar that I told you about earlier that goes into folks like yourself, architects. By the way, I have worked with architects in retrofitting and building of new homes. But that webinar is really great. It's from 2020. But it gives some really great DIY and some air quality testing. That's a great one. Next slide. And I know I'm moving fast, but I'm hoping we're going to be able to have some extra time for questions. Here's a bunch of other QR codes. Watch duty, must have. National Weather Service, really important to have. Komodo, you can do research on that. Wildfire defense education through the United States Green Building Council. I teach classes for free. The classes are free, and I teach classes on structure hardening and defensible space and landscape classes. Really great entity, as you guys know. The Elemental documentary is there as a QR code, and then the LA wildfire documentary done by the same director and producer for PBS. And those are going to go over a lot of different issues. You know, what was happening with the water, with the firefighters, with access. They should have gone into more around fire weather and evacuation, in my opinion. But those are 6 really good sources of information to follow up on later. And you can just leave that up, Cyril, if that works for you for a second. So, you know, going back briefly into the passive house and closing up that envelope as well as you can, during a design phase, that's definitely the way to go. I absolutely love it. Triple pane windows, reducing the amount of vents, mechanical ventilation, filtration, etc. Absolutely love it. But also thinking about ways that we can retrofit and mitigate existing homes. The insurance issue, again, as you guys are hearing, especially if you're in LA, these are homes that are not occupied for a year after the fire, and they're standing, and they're getting remediated. The insurance companies are, either doing the right thing or creating arguments around that. And so it's an incredibly important issue that we as fire resilience professionals, let's say, can contribute to. So again, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of a lot of different important things and open it up to comments and questions. I think that's our last slide. Cyril, besides,
One
see,
more.
I told you, I'm barraging you. So the rebuilding guide, the United States Green Building Council Rebuilding Guide, outstanding document. It's being revised again. It was just made last year. Really, really good to have. BW Builder is, they're a construction company, but what they focus on is doing deep dives and estimating what it actually costs to rebuild a home. So up to 80 to 90% of homeowners are underinsured for rebuild costs. So BW Builder is just one option, and they go do a deep dive, and they can argue on behalf of not as lawyers, but they can show a document to lawyers and say, hey, insurance company, you aren't being accurate in what you say and what you promised, etc. Super handy. The Wildfire Preparedness Guide by the Passive House Network. That's a 2-pager for insurance-related topics. So again, promoting you guys. UnitedPolicyholders.org. Great organization. They advocate, lobby, educate policyholders throughout the country regarding various events, including fire. They go to fires. They were in LA for 2 months talking to thousands of people, educating them and advocating for them. Really, really good organization. And then the last one is a documentary that's kind of interesting. If you guys are into the weather in LA, it's called Santa Ana's, the Fiery Breath of California. It's a little documentary about how the Santa Anas have always been there. They're probably always going to be there, and the different impacts that they cause, as we know from the Tubbs fire where I am and the LA fires. So I believe that is our last slide. You don't need to show. Yeah, you can skip that one if you want. So let's open it up.
Yeah, there are
I
a
can
number
answer.
of
Yep,
questions in the chat, and I'm gonna run through them. And if folks want to jump in, feel free. But I just want to make sure we're close to the end of the hour. Do you have a little extra time for questions, or do you need to
I
get off?
do.
Okay. All right, because we got questions for you. Uh, External rigid insulation between plywood sheathing and siding is used in many passive houses. While the cost of wrapping a 2.5-story house with mineral wool is unaffordable, many people have used rigid EPS for external insulation. If one puts metal screens at the bottom and top of the 3/4 inch vibration channel between hardyboard siding and EPS insulation, how much does that avoid this turning into a fire chimney and an intense wildfire wooey area? Don't know if you know.
Very good. Well described test question. Well, briefly, what I would say is the metal mesh. By the way, it's another California state tested product that's on the Marshall's list. Is wildfire defense mesh. So I didn't put a QR code for that, but look up wildfire defense mesh, and they have designed a stainless steel mesh that may be relevant to your question, but I really like it for screening the lower edging of decking and other areas, and it comes in 1/8 inch and 1/16 inch. It reduces radiant heat, but also eliminates embers from entering into these open areas. So that's how I'm going to leave that question right now because we have such limited time.
And you had another one, John. Do you want to speak to the second?
Go ahead and read it. That's fine.
All right, let's see if I can find it. Oh, please. So does replacing the external EPS insulation with rigid mineral wool for the bottom 2 feet of the wall reduce the risk of EPS above catching fire?
Above catching fire?
So
Mhm.
just if you put EPS on your external insulation wrapping the whole house, but the bottom 2 feet, you wrap a perimeter of mineral wool because that's near the screening. I'm wondering if that would mitigate the problem of uh, catching fire from embers being sucked in there.
Yes. I mean, I don't sell it, of course, but I am a big fan of mineral wool. I think it's very effective. I think it's very high, it has high fire resistance. It's a great product, and I think it's definitely going to be very
And so
effective.
the obvious question is
Yeah.
how what width of mineral wool going up the wall? Do you need 4 inches, 6 inches, 2 feet? I mean, how high up does it have to go to be effective?
I don't feel comfortable in answering that specific question. And and again, I know you're being specific, and I don't want to dodge it. I'm just saying I'd really have to see the context that the building's in, and et cetera. And that's an important point. Seriously, is that there is one isolated aspect, and you're asking a really good question. It's very valid, but it has to be looked in context of the whole building and how everything is set up. So, I'm sorry I don't have a more specific answer for you, but I think you're on the right track.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is pumice-crete an acceptable material for external walls, and does it reduce the fire risk?
Pumice, what was the second word?
Crete?
Crete.
It's an insulation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so, these are materials that we can assume anecdotally,
Mhm.
but it's always good to go with that testing. So, that's going to determine fire resistance, ASTM testing, like the flame retardant paint I mentioned.
Mhm.
They spend a lot of money, a lot of time getting third-party testing. So that's really going to determine that answer, honestly.
All right. So a question here. I don't know if Ian, if you want to speak to it. Want to know about sealants for fire hardening on the outside of an existing home, intumescent paint, and shutters. He has an existing home with a vented attic. He's planning to install 1/16th mesh on all bird blocking and on the interior of the ridge vents.
Yeah, I can, essentially I was thinking about what are the simplest ways, besides defensible space and, mesh over openings to fire harden a home. And I guess you mentioned those Class A fire retardant coatings. So, yeah, I don't know much about those. Just was curious if you could paint over those. They obviously have, an ASTM rating for Class A. So maybe that's the first step is just to,
Hmm.
search for that, see what testing criteria those paints are tested
Hmm.
to
He's
and go
breaking up
from
too.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, can you
Thank you
guys
for
hear me
that
all right?
question. I hope I'm not breaking up. Ian was breaking. I got the gist of it. Thanks, Ian. So what I would say, a couple of things, is the paint should be applied according to the label.
Mm,
And the manufacturer and the engineer that I know, he's like, I don't even like to sell it 6 months out of the year. That's how strict he is. You don't have to be a contract painter, but you have to follow the label. So he doesn't want a lot of excessive moisture. Additionally, the thickness has to be done, correctly. And then third, if it's an exterior coating, it should be coated with a weather-tested top coat. So a lot of commercial buildings have intumescent paint required on the inside, and that's great. It works. It doesn't need a weather-tested top coat. But if you have a 20-year Glidden paint or whatever manufacturer, my understanding is that testing is really not up to snuff. So that's another reason why I like the Fire Free Coatings company, because he spent a lot of money having testing done to determine when you coat. It's a two-stage, right? So you have the intumescent paint and then you have the top coat. When you do it correctly and you use their top coat, it will last a long time. Now, of course, a lot of variables. What are you painting it on? Is there any friction? Yada yada. Um, So I know you had another part to your question, and I'm going super fast here. Was there another quick part of that question, the mesh?
Not so much the mesh, I think I have a sense of the mesh, but
Mhm.
in between the bird blocking where you have trusses sitting on top plates of walls, like oftentimes those aren't necessarily air sealed, right? Like the bird blocking is obviously a
Yeah.
larger opening, but for
Right.
cracks between
Yes.
like that
Good.
bird blocking, is it suitable to use a fire
Good.
resistant sealant in those locations?
Great
Would
question.
you advise that?
Great question, Ian. So that brings up a very important point. We're really wanting to close off gaps and voids, right? So you guys are used to doing that to increase efficiency and seal up the building from the inside, but we also want to do that on the outside. So these gaps that Ian's describing are very important, but it's best to go with a high quality, long lasting caulk. It doesn't necessarily need to be a fire caulk. It's not going to be necessarily exposed. You could go with that, but really you're looking at a feature where an ember is going to hit the caulk, and drop down onto a non combustible surface or a resistant surface, right? So you're really looking to seal up gaps and voids, and that is a game changer. And with these bigger gaps, you might use wildfire defense mesh, 1/16 inch. There's a lot of complex roof designs where there's big openings and et cetera. But you're really trying to block off any areas where embers can pack in and fester. So what happens is a wildfire blow through, firefighters who do walk around, they're like, yep, this house is good. They put a flag on it and leave. 2 days later, they find out that burns down. It's not their fault. There was nothing to observe. There was a number of festering embers that caught the building on fire later. So your point around sealing up gaps and voids is excellent.
And this is a good segue to know how to harden existing weep screed.
Mm, yes. I have a picture that I can send someone if they write me, and maybe later if there's emails and whatnot, Susie will send that to me or whatever. Um, that
Okay, you may have to re-answer this question because we can't hear you.
oh gosh,
And this was important. They're all important, but this one
oh
is.
sorry. Yeah, I don't know why. Yeah, who knows why, right? The internet is bad sometimes. Uh, um, so let's see if I can answer it without getting cut off. But most people, you guys all know this, most people don't realize there's wood behind that stucco. So that bottom edge can easily be painted, even just with basic exterior paint. It's going to allow the wood to breathe, behind the stucco wall, but it's going to preserve the integrity of the wood. And that's a very important thing. You don't want to have wood losing its integrity because of damage to the home, but it's also more combustible. So there's a few different options. I have a contractor friend who would paint it with a flame retardant paint. Then he would put a fire resist, highly fireproof. I don't usually use the word fireproof, but a cord, and stick it up, underneath it if a weep screed couldn't be installed professionally. So there's the metal flange, weep screed. There's potentially a fireproof, roping, and then there's a flame retardant coating. The main thing is the distance from the bottom edge of the siding to the ground. The standard is 6 inches, actually. That's not always possible. That's not always the case. But having that zone free of wood chips, especially in other vegetation, is really going to help you. And again, if you have a home where person says, well, I don't have money for double pane windows. I said, I understand. Move your vegetation at least 5 feet away, and then you're going to have a dramatic reduction in damage to your windows. So likewise, defensible space with that lower edging of siding is really important.
And there was a comment from someone who experienced one of the LA fires that, we do have the zone zero rules in place, or not yet in place, but being considered. And um, they mentioned that even if it's not required by law, it's quite possible that insurance companies will require it. So Do you have any thoughts to add to that?
That's absolutely true. I always go with like site specific, what's going to be safe for that structure, that architecture, all the context. There are homes on my assessment report. I'll say, this home, because of the dynamics of this home, I recommend nothing in the 0 to 5. Other homes, I'll say, you know what, you can have low growing, high moisture, broadleaf plants that are separated from each other. So insurance companies are all over the place. They're going to make different choices. There's going to be rule changes. So I do help navigate those issues when I'm on site with people. But essentially, it's sort of a quagmire out there with different underwriters and inspectors and inspecting from outer space, right, through drone imaging or satellites. There's risk scores. So briefly, I'll wrap up with this. Risk scores are commonly used, and it's not so much, and this is an important thing, I meant to say this, it's not so much where you are on the map. Okay, where you are on the map is important. Are you in a high fire severity zone? Are you in a low one? Are you in a very high fire severity zone? What's your risk score? What's the nature of the fuels at a distance? Is the forest healthy? There's a lot of different variables that are important. But more important than all those other things are two things: an extreme weather event and the condition of your property. So the condition of your property can create enough resilience to tolerate and change the risk score. So risk scores will say, oh, you're this number, and I look it up and I enter in the address, and I said, wow, here's this big thick document, looks pretty impressive. I flipped through to the wildfire category, and their risk score is completely bogus. Why do I say it's bogus? Because I was there, and I observed it, and they did not make the observations that I made, either good or bad. So they're looking from the zip code, they're looking at all these other layers from outer space or drones, etc. Again, in a context, but the risk scores come down to what is happening on the property and how's the property prepared.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think we are at the end of this call, but I wanted to let you all know, again, that we will get this up there in a few weeks. You should have access to this video, and I will pass it back to Passive House California folks. They have some details.
Thank you, Susie. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Susie, and thanks, Stuart. So yes, just a quick presentation about Passive House California. We are affiliated with the Passive House Network, obviously, and the International Passive House Association, Passive House Institute. We need sponsors. As a non-profit, we rely on our sponsors to be able to give incentives at the end to people who want to get trained to become a certified Passive House consultant or Passive House trained persons, etc., etc. So we have our sponsors like Southern California Edison and Small Planet Supplies, Urban Homes, and we have plenty of supporting sponsors. But you can, if you have a company, become a sponsor too, to be able to, like I said, have a good presentation and have a good visibility of your company on the Passive House California website. So just thanks again. Thank you, Stuart, for your presentation. We learned a lot. That was very useful for a lot of us. So now the goal is to make sure that we can pass along this information. And obviously, if you see, if you have, you can follow the presentation on our YouTube channel, and then you can follow us on Passive House California website, passiveHouseCal.org. You can become a member. If you're not, please become a member. You're going to be also a member of Passive House Network and IFA. And that's it. Just please spread the word about this presentation about Passive House California. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.